So let's now try and see whether or not it's possible for India to be the largest economy in the world at some point in the next few decades. We could do that by looking at a number of long-range forecasts that banks and consulting companies like Citigroup and PwC have created in the last few years. We'll then look at a particularly interesting long-range study that goes all the way out to 2100 by the Australian bank Westpac. What's interesting about this forecast is that it includes 4 different scenarios. So whether you're optimistic or pessimistic about India or China or the West, this forecast has a prediction of their share of the world economy and how it will evolve over the coming decades, all the way out to 2100. Let's start with one of the best known forecasts. That's Citigroup's Global Growth Generators report from 2011. This predicts that India will overtake the United States in PPP terms in the 2030s, so in about 15-20 years. That's just what China has done in the last year. But it goes on to say that India will go on to overtake China as the world's largest economy by 2050. HSBC, one of the other great international banks, published a World in 2050 report, which also predicts that India will grow faster than China over the coming decades. PwC consulting firm in 2013 also published a World in 2050 report and came to a similar conclusion. According to the PwC report, between 2011 and 2050, the US will grow 2.5 times, 2.5 times bigger. China is going to grow 4.7 times bigger. But India is going to grow 7.7 times. It's going to be significantly larger than it is today. What that means is that between 2015 and 2050, China's share of the world economy will increase by about 17%. India's will increase by 96%, or nearly double. Meanwhile, the United States will decrease by about 19%, and Europe's by a massive 30%. So you can really see how the economic centre of gravity is shifting eastwards. And that's exactly what the London School of Economics professor Danny Quah, he mapped out where the economic centre of gravity was on a map and how it shifted from northern India to the west, through the Mediterranean, out to the Atlantic in the middle of the 20th century, before moving backwards, and it's now somewhere over sort of Turkey, and it's going to eventually settle in the next couple of decades back where it was 2,000 years ago. Perhaps the most recent of these long-term studies is the UK's Centre for Economics and Business Research, World Economic League Table 2016. They predict that India will become the largest economy in the world some point in the second half of the 21st century. Now, the most recent short-term analysis by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has spoken about how India is the bright spot in the world economy and that it's likely to grow faster than China, potentially for decades to come. In fact, the IMF predicts that India will grow between 7 and 7.75% in 2016 and could conceivably grow faster than that in the coming years. But the study that I mentioned earlier, which I find the most intriguing, is the one commissioned by the US-Australia Alliance. Hugh Mackay from Westpac Bank considered 5 different scenarios for the world economy up to 2100, so throughout the 21st century. In 4 of those 5 scenarios, India becomes the largest economy in the world at some point. And in fact, in the most optimistic scenario, 30% of the world's economy by the end of this century is Indian. That would create a position of dominance in the world economy for India, similar to what America experienced in the 20th century and Britain in the 18th. There is no doubt that India has tremendous potential. The challenge is whether it will be able to achieve it. As we've seen, there is a pretty broad consensus amongst forecasters that the US, China, and India are going to be the largest economies in the world and probably be of similar size to each other by the middle of the 21st century. Now, don't forget that we are as close to 2050 as we are to 1980. And if you're 20 years old studying at college today, you will probably be about your parents' age when India is the largest if not close to being the largest economy in the world. Before stopping here, I want to flag up a few key points that I haven't yet been able to address. For example, even if India delivers on these economic projections, because of the scale of its population, in terms of its socioeconomic pyramid, it will look very different to the United States or even China. Socioeconomic issues loom large, as the World Bank estimates that close to 300 million people, nearly 25% of India's total population, have earnings below the international poverty line, which is currently $1.9, $1.90 per day. And most of those people in India actually earn far less even than that. This makes India the country with the highest number of people in extreme poverty. Yet the country is now considered to really be a middle lower income country, rather than one of the lowest, as the percentage of the Indian population living in poverty is actually lower than that in many other countries with poor populations. Meanwhile, India also has 84 billionaires, making it the country with the fourth highest number in the world, not to mention hundreds of thousands of dollar millionaires. New fortunes are being made every year in almost every sector, with the fastest injection of wealth creation in recent years coming from technology startups and e-commerce. As complex as it is to measure inequality, it becomes even more complex to compare inequality across different countries. Should we just consider a country's mean income without waiting for population and measure country to country, like the Gini coefficient does? In which case, India comes out more equal than the United States. Or should we weight by population and stick to averages instead of actual incomes of individuals in those countries? This is particularly important with India because of the scale, the diversity and complexity of the country. Even if India has an economy of similar size to the United States, it will still be 4 to 5 times poorer by comparison in per capita terms because of its huge population. But let's look at it the other way. Let's start with income. So if India's household incomes catch up with those of the United States, let's say they don't even reach United States level in the 21st century, but only half of that level, India would have an economy in overall terms that's twice the size of the United States in that scenario. And the trajectory that India is on, as we've seen from these projections, is exactly that. The incomes in India gradually over the decades are going to catch up with those of the US. They're never going to overtake, according to the projections, but that still means that India will end up with an enormous economy because of its scale. I wonder if we really shouldn't think more frequently in terms of global inequality, which forgets countries altogether and measures individual incomes and shares of global wealth. Aren't we all in this together? In nominal GDP per capita income terms, quite simply the size of the economy divided by its population. In 2015, according to the IMF, it was $55,805 in the United States, $7,990 in China, and just $1,617 in India. Meaning America is nearly 35 times richer than India in per capita nominal terms. Whether in the case of the Occupy Wall Street protests or Thomas Piketty's Capital, the inequality of income distribution has come to the fore of economic debates in recent times. It's no less important in India. In week 3, we'll take a look at this question from a social and political angle when we examine the issue of caste. And in week 4, we'll try to tease out some more of the complexity of the issue when we consider the middle class. Should we examine inequality from the perspective of wealth, income, or consumption? How do we define poverty? How large is the Indian middle class? How does location matter from rural to urban, or from state to state? In week 5 and 6, we'll also look at some examples of the creativity and innovation being used by the government of India to help improve opportunities for India's poorest, and learn how, in some respects, technology is helping to level the playing field. With this in mind, let's return to the bigger picture as we come to consider India's future development trajectory today and the wider context of the digital age in which we now live.